Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today I'm joined by Joelle Chinnock. Joelle is currently the coordinator for the Ending Homelessness Initiative for the Northern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. Previously, she was the Director of Disaster Recovery and Development for the Paradise Seventh-day Adventist Church in California. Joelle, welcome to Inside Missions.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you so much for having me here today. So,
Maranatha worked closely with you during the Camp Fire in Northern California 2018, which at the time, I had to go back and kind of refresh my memory. I know for people that live there, you don't need to do that, but even living an hour and a half away, I had to refresh my memory. It was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California's history. And for perspective, it was the most expensive natural disaster in the world for that year, as far as insurance claims and insured losses. So, it was also the deadliest wildfire in like 100 years. So if you don't mind taking us back, what was your November 8, 2018 like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thank you for asking. I think sometimes, we're almost 5.5 years out, and I know and grateful for a lot of people, they've been able to move on from that. And there's some of us who are still there. We've chosen to be there. And it is there is that daily reminder of what will never be the same. But at the same time, there's a really beautiful opportunity for growth out of it. And we've seen so much of God's hand through the process. And so that's been really incredible to watch. So taking back to November 8, 2018, in a much different position personally at the time. I was a stay-at-home mom homeschooling my kids and woke up November 8. It was every other day. We had been told maybe there would be power outages if the winds got high, but we had heard lots of those reports before, so we kind of didn't really think much of it. Woke up that morning, I went for my usual walk on the bike path, which we live close to, and as on my way back down, I started seeing a big plume of it's a plume of smoke, but at the time I thought it was just a cloud, and I thought that's kind of odd. It's clear in the rest of the sky, and as I kept moving down the bike path, it kept getting bigger and bigger, and then started making connections with family and other people in the area, and kind of questioning, what's going on, what's happening. Oh, there's a fire has erupted, but we should be okay because it's 8 miles away. Don't worry about it. So I kept walking home. When I got home, ash had started to fall in our local area as I was actually sending my son off to school that morning. I did have one son who had just joined the local elementary school, and I was sending him off to school, and I said, waved, have a great day, love you, as ash was falling. And I honestly didn't think much of it because we'd been through wildfires before. Got inside the house, probably about 15 minutes, I'm getting a call from my son at school. Mom, they're shutting the school down. I'm coming home. And I think that's when some of the wheels started turning. This is not the same as what we've been through before. And from that point, for the next probably 2 hours, it was a lot of chaos in our home, a lot of questioning what's happening, what's going on, trying to pack as best as we could, while at the same time caring for 3 other children who were naive enough and didn't know what was happening, and in many ways converted. One of my daughter kind of shut down in that moment and was unable to complete the task I was asking her within a bit of a panic state. And But again, we had no choice. So we had to move through this process. And so we were packing up as much as we could, putting it in a trailer. My husband came home from work at that time, realizing the severity of what was going on. So we're packing everything up, throwing everything in. And I hadn't stepped outside again for about another hour and a half. And when I did, and I saw that the sky was pretty much dark and our dawn to dusk lights outside had come back on, that's when I realized that something really big was happening. But I didn't realize the part that we had to play in that yet. So we were able to get into our truck and trailer, and I drove the kids out. It took us about at least 2 hours of not fighting traffic, but going with traffic. But it was all stop and go for the 2 hours that we went out. And certainly I'm at a space now, having been 5 years out, that I can reflect on that day and not have the same emotional impact that it's had in years past when I've, related this story. But during those 2 hours, at least, there was uncertainty of knowing what was going to happen to us. There was uncertainty knowing what would happen to the rest of our friends and family in the area. We were getting reports from family outside the area of what was going on, keeping us kind of in contact of what they were hearing reports about. And then we were also seeing and hearing the fire and the eruptions going on, behind us and around us. And I know that God was really protecting the car that I was in with my little tribe, because we were able to exit. When you look at the time lapse now of how the fire moved through Paradise and the timeline at which it moved through Paradise that day, we were able to exit on the only road that still did not have active burning at that time. It just hadn't gotten to the space we were at yet. So in many ways, I feel that God was able to spare my children a much more difficult exit story than what we know some of their fellow students have experienced.
Some of the video from the roads is truly terrifying, and there's flames just leaping from both sides of the road. Yeah. What were your thoughts, as you're driving away from your home? It's so easy for us on the outside that didn't go through it to kind of not really understand what it's like to have your whole life basically, it's in jeopardy. Everything that you've, the way you've been living, everything is hanging in the balance. What was that like?
And, to be honest, in that moment, that's not what I was thinking.
Yeah.
In those moments, it really was, how am I simply going to get my family out safe?
Did you think that there was a chance that, were you pretty sure things were going to be as bad as they were, just seeing where it was coming and how fast the wind was? Or was it like, well, we have to leave and we'll just see what happens and hopefully we'll come back to our house?
Yeah, I believe there definitely was, because I remember we'll be gone for a couple days, so pack up a couple days worth of clothes, kids.
Okay.
We'll come back, because we've kind of done this before. We've had to evacuate or been told to evacuate, and and nothing happened, at least to our space. So there was kind of that, this will be an inconvenience for a couple days, and then we'll come back, and it's all going to kind of go back to normal. And then not knowing the severity of what was necessarily happening behind us and around us, because we were, when you're in your vehicle and cell service is cut off and you really are, and I'm, a mom with 4 kids, my focus is just keeping the truck going straight and keeping them as calm as possible. So I didn't have a lot of opportunity to think about what's actually happening to the rest of my community right now. In many ways, I felt very selfish in that moment of I just have to protect my tribe, what I've got
Sure.
here. And then I think as the reports are starting to come out the rest of that day, when we finally did make it down to Chico, and we knew at that point we would be safe, that's kind of starting when the waves of information started to flow in as we connected with we were able to connect with other church members, and they're like family members, and we kind of we would congregate in areas together. And as those waves of information would kept coming in, we were checking in with each other. Who has heard from this family? Who has heard from that family? What's happening to the hospital? As we were hearing those reports coming in, you're checking Facebook, you're trying to listen to the sheriff's scanners, whatever you could. And you have 12, 15 people all accessing information. They're all sharing the information they're hearing. That's when kind of the picture is starting to be etched in your mind of what you've just been through.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's interesting because if tragedy strikes, someone passes away, you have your church, right? I mean, they send you flowers, maybe food. You have a memorial service. You grieve with everyone there at the church. Your church was gone. Did you feel that void in the aftermath of not having that physical spiritual place to meet and congregate?
I personally didn't feel that loss because the Chico Church just immediately opened and embraced and welcomed and accepted. And so in our grief, we were able to pour out onto them essentially. And we were loved well, and we were embraced well, and we were held well in that grief. And they provided that physical space for us to meet. So as far as for me personally, not having the physical church, I wasn't as affected by that as maybe others were, because I do know others in our church community who that was a tremendous loss for them.
And I'm glossing over what people would be grieving. Well, in case you forgot or maybe didn't know, I think it was like 95% of the structures in Paradise were gone.
Yeah. So
basically the whole town was wiped out. 85 people, something like that, lost their lives. So devastating. Devastating
in such a magnitude that we know roughly 50,000 people were displaced, within a matter of hours. So my mind can't even comprehend what 50,000 people is like, and let alone let's just displace all of them. So it's no wonder there were traffic jams, no wonder there were accidents, no wonder there was congestion and people couldn't exit. There was all those pieces. And in the wake of then starting to realize all that you had lost, right? Yeah, you lost your church, you lost your home, you lost your grocery store, you lost your chiropractor, you lost your vet, where you took your vet, you lost your pharmacy, you lost your friends. Our church had roughly 400 homes within our church. People lost their homes. So then there's that immediate loss of that physical structure. But then, like I was just talking with my daughter today, and she was mentioning how a lot of her friends have moved away in the recent, in the last several years. And so there was that ongoing loss, that ongoing bleeding of what the community, what it had been into what it's, trickled into now, and what it's, trying to rebuild so desperately.
Do you think that the response from outside your community was sufficient? Do you think that there was enough assistance from outside of the Chico Paradise area?
So as I have, maybe just a little digression here, I was a homeschooling mom, hadn't worked outside the home in 10 plus years. And then when the disaster hit, we put our kids in school, and I started volunteering at the school, and that just worked its way into a job. And then that's when I started working with the church and ended up becoming the director of disaster recovery after doing the Shed Project and some other things. And so in that role, I was able to step into what's called the long-term recovery group, and I was able to step in the broader space of where all the disaster recovery work was happening, collaborate with different organizations, see the work that was being done, the enormity of the work that was being done, all the federal and national organizations that were pouring in, all the multiple denominations that were pouring in with their services, hearing about the community foundation that was collecting millions and millions of dollars on behalf of the recovery effort. So in that larger context, I believe the campfire was so blessed because we did receive so much help.
You could see it. You could feel it.
I could see it. I could feel it. Now, certainly, sometimes the trickle down doesn't always happen. So, some of the actual residents of the community might not have felt it or seen it as much. I think because then we were also then in subsequent years, as other very large fires took place within our area, the funding and the resources available for them were so dramatically different than what we received. So we received a huge blessing that I don't want to overlook. And I think with any natural disaster or any disaster of this type, there's just going to be that natural waning of interest. And so probably what has been a challenge for us is The first couple years, we had resources and volunteers and funding available, and they were utilized to the best of the abilities. And as we have gone out farther from the disaster, there's still a tremendous need for recovery, but the funding is dried up. Volunteers aren't coming as much, and I'm sure that's a natural evolution that's going to happen.
Interesting. Going back to the days after this fire happened, was there a moment in time that you personally made this decision? I'm going to go from like just empathizing with my community and my neighbors to going a step further in some way. Did you have a specific moment where you said, I want to do something more, I want to help at a larger scale?
Actually, I can remember a very definitive moment. It was one Sabbath in church, and Garrison Chafee, who was our youth pastor at the time, who was also the person responsible for starting the organization Love Paradise from our church, and we can talk about that more later, because that was an organization, that was a ministry that was started before the fire. So he had helped stand that up. And then I remember sitting in church that one Sabbath, and he was kind of inspiring those of us in the congregation of what are ways that we can get involved to connect with. And he highlighted a few of the organizations that he had been able to see that were doing work post-disaster. And I still very clearly remember that movement in my heart of okay, God, what are you doing here? And I can't remember the timeline of if it was shortly after that I was able to then start working at the church and working with Garrison and just being taught by him and his passion. But that was the moment.
Did you have any work experience or any experience doing sort of community disaster relief in the past? What were some of your thoughts? Maybe there wasn't time, maybe you were just got right into it and got involved, but how did you feel yourself growing in that role as you stepped in and to start helping?
Yeah, and that's such a funny thing, and I think this is one of the ways that God can, in some ways, has a sense of humor. Why would he, I sometimes question, why would he ask somebody who has their degree in nutrition to step into doing disaster recovery work and then eventually lead them into helping to address homelessness? It's just really neat to see where God leads when you hopefully surrender your life to him, right? So no, I had no experience in doing disaster recovery work other than I've run a household for multiple years with homeschooling children, and so there was the ability to multitask and keep tabs on lots of different things that were going on at the same time. And so as we started stepping into those roles and seeing the opportunities that were available, our opportunities started very small. We started out doing home kits, which were a collection of different household items that you would put all in one container, and then you would give them out to people who could use a ways to kind of
care package of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. So from there it started, and then we just continued to step into our opportunities that God opened up. And really it really was Maranatha coming on board when we had, my initial idea was, let's build a couple sheds. I had no idea what God had planned. And then Garrison was like, hey, Maranatha had called us. They said they were willing to help sometime. Let's call them back and see what they can do. And so that's where just this perfect Petri dish inspired the Shed Project came from. We have this idea.
Where did you get the idea from?
To be honest, I was on Facebook. I was told one of my tasks was
all good ideas come from.
Right, absolutely, right? One of my tasks was, hey, start looking into ways that we can be effective in the community. How can we start stepping in, and what are things we can do? And I saw somebody else on Facebook who was building a shed for a survivor in Paradise. And I thought, we have people in our church who know how to build things. We can build a shed. And I had been living in a trailer for 6 months there were 6 of us living in a trailer for 6 months. So very personally understood the need for additional space.
So your house burned?
So our house did not burn. We had significant damage to our house, and it took a total of 10 months before we could get back in.
I've heard there's been a lot of people, it took years for them to start rebuilding. Utilities weren't available. A lot of reasons that people just weren't able to live in if their houses were still standing, or that they weren't able to start rebuilding. I think a lot of the insurance companies took a long time to get that process started as well.
There was so many hurdles for people to overcome, and probably no two stories are the same, but all the things you listed there were challenges. If insurance companies, understandably they'd never been through a disaster like this before. So they had to all get their all ducks in a row, and that took time. And then imagining processing that many claims all at the same time, it just takes extra staffing that maybe they didn't have trained and ready to do. So certainly there were some, challenges that way. And then, what construction workers we did have in the area, all of a sudden they have more work coming out theirs and they know what to do with. So how do you get lined up? Then the town, how do you get permits? How do you accept hundreds of permits and reissue permits all in the same time frame? That has to be a process of working through things. In addition to the town wanting to implement some new codes and new restrictions and different things. And so if people didn't, or maybe they didn't have insurance funding to be able to rebuild, just so many hurdles for people to overcome.
You drive through the area and there's just still some trees standing, but all of the structures are gone, and you have people living in campers on their properties. So explain why a shed would be helpful.
Yeah, so at the time, the idea came about, roughly 7-8 months after the fire, and the majority of people who were living in Paradise, or kind of in the surrounding burn scar footprint, were able to reside there if they were in a trailer on their own property. And oftentimes those trailers were way too small for the size of the number of people that were being housed in them. And so as we had all those generous donations that were coming in at the beginning of the fire, and people were starting to accumulate stuff that they had lost, whether it's, a generator or maybe a bike for their kid to have something to do outside the trailer, or, maybe they needed a change of clothing for their kids because kids grow. And so you're always needing different sizes of clothing for them, or tools, you're keeping tools, you're trying to keep your yard tools secure so that you can start doing the work of cleaning up your lot, or whatever the case was. There was a lot of theft happening at the time if stuff wasn't secured, and even people, breaking into sheds and stuff. So it was the most secure way that we could think of at the time to help provide some of that additional space on such a mass scale.
What was it like trying to coordinate? What was the goal? Was it we're going to try to build, 10 sheds? What are we trying to do here? What was the thought?
I was going to build a couple sheds. That was my goal. Let's build a couple sheds and we'll be good. And then I remember clearly when David Woods came and met with us, instantly it was, we can do 100 sheds. And I was terrified, because then I knew that meant we had to write grants. How do we come up with the funding for this? How do we source all the materials? How do we have enough volunteers? My mind started spinning. And then I remember getting a call from Garrison probably within a week or two after that. And he's like, David actually wants to do 200 sheds. And that's how are we going to get the money? I was really concerned about the funding. But the thing at the time, since so much funding had come in, we were a no-brainer of a project, really, for the organizations that we were applying to, and they were more than happy to donate to us. And so, again, that was just God's protection. That was God's providence for us. Hey, I've got you covered. And then because of the success of that project, because we had done so well and built those 202 sheds the first time, and, we were so blessed to receive so much amazing media coverage, and the community just was so much in support of what was happening. We were then approached by the largest donors, as well as the American Red Cross, and they said, we see the need. We see there's a lot more need for this. Can you please redo it? Can you do more? And so we went back to the drawing board. We went back to Maranatha, and we said, this is what we've been asked to do. And Maranatha was really great about, yeah, we can do that.
What was your experience working with Maranatha volunteers that came from all over the place?
To be honest, I had so much fun on the projects. Just meeting so many different people, hearing so much of their testimonies as to why they participate, seeing their willingness to, in essence, uproot their life for three weeks at a time and come and give generously to a community they have no impact, connections to. That was, I think, when I started understanding deeper what the benefits of that volunteering are, and to see this amazing organization that Maranatha is, and how they have created this such culture of we give back and we serve.
You mentioned David Woods, our director of North America projects. He kind of masterminded a workflow in the parking lot of the Paradise Seventh-day Adventist Church. Can you describe for people what that setup was like?
I'm sure he would do a much better job, so I apologize if I kind of slaughter what his intention was. He's not here to speak to that. No. But, it was a really, really cool thing of an assembly line. I know I learned a lot of terminology in the project because, again, I was very green at the time. So they created what are called jigs. And they then put these jigs, which was our template, on casters. And so you could essentially start building a shed on these rollers that you would then move down through the assembly line to the next station. Okay, the first station you create the floor. Then you roll it to the next station where you put all the walls on. Okay, then you roll it to the next station where you put the roof on and tie it all down and everything. And it was just such a neat process. And I had so many people come on that project who were not connected with Maranatha or not necessarily connected with the project itself, and were so impressed with that concept of that just streamlined assembly line approach. And that's the success of why we're able to build so many. And then it was really neat for me, as there were several volunteers on the first project who were going to come back the second time. And in the meantime, they had already been planning of ways they could improve. How could we make it faster? How can we make it more streamlined? How can we build them better? So that was a really neat process for me to watch, that the wheels had been turning about, again, right? How do we improve an assembly line? It's kind of the human nature, right?
And this was done without any electricity, I believe, right? There was no electricity there. So generators running constantly. Some people brought campers, and then I think others stayed in the school, right?
So on the first project, the school campus and the church campus did not have electricity reinstated to it. I believe we did have water back onto the school and church campus at the time. So everything had to be run off of generators. So the entire construction phase of the project was run off multiple generators, as well as the kitchen and all of the food that was prepared. And then we had generators that were able to support the classrooms where we had people sleeping at night. We did have a lot of people come within their trailers, and I think they all had to bring their own individual generators the first time. The second time, we were able to then hook into the main electrical at the campus, and we were able to create hookups for campers and stuff. But that first project, it was pretty rough. It's pretty rough.
3 projects total, 452 sheds. We did the 200 first, and then said, let's do more. Lowe's was involved in giving a lot of really discounted materials. There's a lot of corporate support for it in the area. What did it feel to you to be able to accomplish this, token? It's not like it's going to bring back their former lives and, their houses, but it was something that could help, a little bit of hope in a time of darkness.
I think, to be honest, that was the most impactful part, is that we heard kind of overwhelmingly, once a shed was actually delivered to somebody's property, it was this, they would say, this is the first sign of hope that I have of something growing out of this place again. So that for me was the gift. That was the crown, the reason for doing it. And I don't think I didn't accomplish anything. It was really neat to see God working, and he brought so many amazing people onto that project. And again, it was at that time where the resources were just flowing so freely and so generously that, you know, Garrison and I just really got to be kind of the stewards of what God was intended all along. So that was pretty neat to see him work.
Was there a particular story that touched you the most that you can think of that you'd want to share? A recipient of one of these sheds?
Well, so in addition to the recognition of what people needed space, right? They needed a place to store stuff. When we came across a woman at the very beginning, even probably before the shed project had started, that's when we started understanding the magnitude of what storage space could do for somebody. So there was a woman that we had met through some other outreach purposes that our church was involved in at the time, and she was a diabetic patient who was currently on dialysis, and she was able to do home dialysis out of her trailer. So she would have to dialyze herself just about every other day in order to survive. And the dialysate material that she needed would come kind of in a bulk quantity in these large cardboard containers. And they would send her like months and months supply at a time. Well, if that product sat outside in the rain and in whatever the elements it were, and it compromised that dialysate, then it compromised her ability to maintain and sustain life for herself. She was also a mother. I believe she had 2 kids there at the time, in a really, really, really tough situation. And so she was the first recipient outside of, we had some guinea pigs of let's see if we can deliver a shed safely. But she was our first recipient for an actual shed because we knew that for her, it really was a matter of life and death for her to be able to store that product safely. My heart was grieved. Probably about a year after that, she did end up passing. And we hope that in some way, the project and what we were able to do there helped prolong some of that time and space for her.
Yeah.
But that was a really touching life to be involved with.
452. I mean, they were all to different residents. And people only got one, I assume. For you, how did your community work sort of evolve, or maybe not grow out of the shed project, but how did that experience aid you as you continued to serve your community in the future?
Well, that was a really neat opportunity, is because of the success of that project. It really helped put the Paradise Adventist Church on the map within the disaster recovery space of the ability to stand up a project to complete it well and for the good of the community. And so then we were starting to shift into, well, what's more that we could build? And we had multiple discussions about let's start building some small houses, almost like a Habitat for Humanity model. And so we had the opportunity to step into that space, and we worked with some volunteer organizations that were coming in, and Maranatha was a part of those conversations at the time. We had a contractor on board. We worked with our local long-term recovery group. We were working in disaster case management, and pieces were coming together for that project, and we were able to complete one small house built for a survivor. I believe she was 87 and had lost everything in the fire. Just a couple months before the fire, she had let her insurance lap because she just couldn't afford it anymore. So when the fire hit, it completely wiped out her space. And so she'd been living in a trailer for those, it was probably about 2 years until we'd been able to help with this home. And that was a partnership between local groups, like certain different contractors would donate certain work to the space, like Some of them helped dig the electrical lines for us, kind of as pro bono. And then Lowe's stepped in with a lot of supplies for that project. We worked with an organization called Academy Mortgage. They were a mortgage company, and they do service projects all around the world. And Paradise was chosen as their service project that year. So we worked with a couple different organizations in Paradise to bring them in, to house them, to feed them, and then have them work on building the house during the day. And that was a really, really neat project to be involved in. And we were planning to do more, but sometimes circumstances change and we weren't able to continue with that project. But it was really neat to be involved. And that was the project. We called that Love Builds, because we figured that's
makes sense.
Love Builds. Yeah.
Over all these different initiatives and projects, did your view of your neighbor and of your community, of your mission field, change at all from maybe the kind of idea of what missions is in your childhood or growing up?
Mm-hmm. I would definitely say the idea of that term mission. I think I've had to redefine that term. I had the opportunity in high school to go on a mission trip, right? And that was to Mexico. So it was definitely out of country, out of my space where I was used to inhabiting. And now, after working in disaster recovery and seeing, in some ways, it's so much, it's easier to get involved on a local level and into your local space, because maybe you only have a few hours a week that you can contribute to something. Maybe you have a weekend, or the drive time is different, whatever. But I definitely have redefined what outreach looks like, and I'm so grateful that I've been able to do it very, very within my geographic footprint, because then I think it's also really pulling my kids into the projects a lot more than other opportunities I would have had.
What advice would you have for someone that is wanting to be involved? Because obviously Maranatha is a mission organization. We do a lot of mission trips abroad. But there's a lot of barriers to entry for going on a trip overseas. It could be costly. It could be just a fear of traveling. What advice do you have for someone that's maybe wanting to be involved with something, and they have this idea of grandeur of a missionary is supposed to be someone that goes on the missionary boat across, the seas somewhere else?
Right. I don't know if I'd be the best for advice on that, other than I think sometimes we really underestimate how much just a kind word actually means to somebody, or a simple gesture of love, what it can mean.
Well, let me just say that you are being a missionary. The work that you have done, the people that you have empowered to be involved with all these different initiatives. There's missionaries at the Paradise Seventh-day Adventist Church that are living out the mission of Jesus to those around the church there. So I would say that, you guys are embodying missionary work, even though it might not be exotic because it's not in another location. But you're absolutely, Maranatha's mission statement is to, spread the gospel by building people through the construction of urgently needed buildings. And mission work looks different in different places in the world. And you guys, you're doing mission work, or you've been doing mission work in Paradise for the last almost 6 years. So
I would agree. And if we could maybe go back to that, I love that part of your tagline of you build people. And I think has been more of the focus that we've been able to have at the Paradise Adventist Church, just on the local level. We've had researchers come in post-fire, doing studies, multiple different universities and organizations coming in and interviewing a bunch of people, collecting data, trying to make coming up with hypotheses and trying to prove them, and writing, publishing their reports and all that stuff. And so I've had opportunity to talk with lots of them over the last several years. And one of them came in and we're doing some interviews and asking, what, if you could do one thing for everybody in this space, what would you do? And at the time, the response I came up with was, I don't know that I would actually restore somebody's house for them. Let me just give everybody a house and then we'll be fine. Or let me, whatever your physical need is. Really what I came up with at the time was, if people knew that they had somebody to walk alongside them through that journey, because the journey's going to be rough and I can't take away that journey for them, but could be somebody there that could walk alongside them without judgment and just hold them in the space of love. I felt like that was one of the best gifts I could give somebody. So it might not necessarily be that a physical, tangible something I'm giving to them.
Do the residents of Paradise, did they feel unsupported in a lot of ways? Is that why you say that? Or,
I don't necessarily know that they did. I guess maybe that was more the role I looked at it, because I could keep giving people stuff, right? Yeah. I could keep bringing in donations and just giving them stuff. But at the end of the day, what kind of impact have I really made? So I think I looked at it more as a personal impact of could I have shown them empathy and understanding and compassion in those moments? So that was how I chose to try and interact with a lot of the people that we serve. And let's be clear, we've given a lot of stuff away.
That's
right?
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We've done both.
We've done both.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's been a focus for me.
How do you feel like your faith has grown over the last 6 years? I mean, being involved with all these community initiatives, what have you learned about God? Or I don't know, how has your relationship with God grown?
Mm-hmm. I would love to say that I never have doubts anymore. But that's, that would not be telling the truth, right? It's also been very interesting the last 5 years doing as much of the trauma work and understanding what trauma is and how it affects your body and how it affects your thought processes and what it does, and seeing that played out in people within our community has also been really interesting. And then how does the spiritual impact that? I think sometimes I have more questions now than I did before, but I still know that I serve a faithful God. I still know that I serve a God who is walking beside me through all of it. That's what I've seen time and time again. Do I have more questions answered? No. Do I have advice to give? No. But I know he's there.
I realized earlier, I should say too, Maranatha is not a disaster relief organization. We usually let the experts handle, because we have had people say, hey, you should get involved with this disaster or this disaster. You guys would be perfect for it. And we usually just get out of the way, let the professionals who do disaster relief handle, the immediate needs right away. And then sometimes afterwards we'll get involved. We're actually, I was telling you earlier, we're going to be getting involved in Maui and helping with some of the needs there, similar to the fire in Paradise. So we're excited about that, but it's not really something that we do as a general rule, like disaster recovery. But
Right. But I do think that's a very wise approach, because I think one of the challenges that we saw in the Paradise Fire, and then I've seen it kind of echoed again with the Maui fire, is there is so much wonderful enthusiasm to want to rush in and help. And we can provide this, and we can do that, which those are good things. But I think sometimes there aren't enough steps taken backwards to actually ask the communities, what is it that you need? And so I think Maranatha has a really wise approach in that, of kind of waiting till that dust settles a bit, and then to be able to ask those questions. We think we know what you need, but what do you actually need? What do you want? I think it's a really wise. And then I think there's also a real benefit to seeing organizations that are willing to come years 2, 3, 4, and 5 after a disaster, though that's also really impactful to a location too. So
we're recording this May 2024. What is the state of Paradise right now? I mean, how is the recovery going?
So to date, I probably should know my stats a little bit better. We probably have roughly a third of the houses and structures have been rebuilt. So if we lost, 18,000, I think our numbers are roughly around 5,000 structures have been rebuilt. Maybe not quite that high. And we probably know that those numbers might never get back to what it was before. So in many respects, there's a bit of, we've become a smaller town, which, is not necessarily a bad thing for everybody. Some people really enjoy that. We have a lot more wide open spaces. We've lost a lot of trees. So the benefit of that is most lots now have canyon views, which we didn't have before. So we try to look at the positives.
It's a perk now.
Yeah. We do have, higher temperatures because we don't have the tree coverage. We do have stronger winds now because we don't have that tree breakage. There is, it's still a community that carries a lot of trauma and scars, and especially for those who were already in a very precarious situation heading into the fire, their recovery stories have been even more traumatic. As a whole, our church and our church community recovered very well from the fire. We were insured, we had the resources, and we had the network of a church community regionally, globally, that came in to support us. But for so many of those that we've done, so over the last couple years, we've actually operated a warehouse in Paradise called Love Gives, where it's a donation-based warehouse. So we've been giving out donations like furniture and household items for the last 2 years to people. And it's actually, the funny thing is, we've that project we've given out, what were the numbers close? 2 or 3 times the amount of dollar benefit as we did with the Shed project, and we've reached probably 3 times the number of people through that location as we did on the Shed project. And the thing that we see time and time again there with the population that warehouse serves is those who were already hanging on kind of the last rung of the ladder and then that fell off. Their recovery process has been just absolutely brutal, and so that's hard to watch.
You've been at this for 5 years, like in an official capacity, I guess. You clearly enjoy it. You feel called to it. What was it about that initial experiences that made you want to continue? What made you want more serving the people that were near you?
I guess in a very selfish, personal way, it was very much a way for me to be able to heal from the trauma of what our community had gone through. If there was something I could do to give back, if there's something our church could do to give back and to help others, that for me felt very maybe empowering and healing as compared to I could create, as compared to staying in a more of a victim role. What could I create out of this disaster? And then I think it has just become a passion. I really enjoy those that I get to work with. I enjoy collaborating with all the agencies outside of just the local church body there. That has been super eye-opening, and I've learned so much in that space, and seeing the tremendous amount of empathy and compassion. It just continues. It's the reason, you want to wake up every day and keep doing it, because you see such great, you're inspired by the other people doing the work with you.
I love that you say it's a creative act, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to go serve at a stereotypical soup kitchen or something. Maybe I'm not going to enjoy that. It's not going to be an environment I want to be in. And yet, of course, that would be a really great place to serve. Also, there's really some unique problems probably in your community that need a creative mind to, work on a solution that you could potentially be part of making change. So I'm wondering what advice you have for people that are not serving in their community. This is your chance. What would you tell people who maybe need to get off the bench and need to get into the game as far as like serving their community, serving the mission field that's near them, and all the possibilities that exist for how they might go about doing that?
Yeah.
Because like I said, you've been doing it, and you
Right.
might say like you don't have anything to share, but you've been living it out and have, like you said, been networking with a lot of great people in the community. You've been serving, you've been creating. So I want to hear what you have to, what you might think, what you might tell someone.
I think if I could use a very clear example from somebody we both know and Maranatha loves, a friend of mine who I met on the Shed Project, I've been able to stay in touch with. I think he is when I look at what he is being able to create and why, this was how I would mimic the concept of what he's doing. And so my concept is, it's really, for me, it was, you start small. You start one little step, right? And then God just continued. For us, God has just continued to open the doors. And it was just that initially taking that one step. So I want to, a friend of mine, Luther Finley, who is a very beloved Maranatha volunteer, I met him on the Shed Project and was just so inspired by him and his testimony and what he's been through in life. And then fast forward, he and I we've stayed in contact over the last several years. Fast forward into my new role, working with the conference and helping to address homelessness. He reached out to me, I reached out to him, can't remember, and he started telling me about what he's been doing in his local community. So their church started to become involved in feeding homeless with other churches in their area prior to COVID. And they would all, I believe it was, one night a week, the Lutheran church made the food at this location and then served it. And another night a week, another church would do it and serve it. But it was all made in one church's kitchen and served out of there. So the people in the area knew to come to that one location. Well, then with COVID, that disrupted that ability to serve in that capacity. So Luther and his wife, Darlene, took it under their wings and decided, we have a kitchen at our church. What can we do to start creating meals? And we'll just take it out to the people. So they, again, started very small, started making some food in their church kitchen, and then taking food out to people. I had the opportunity to go work with them back in January. They're up to, roughly 60 to 75 meals once a week. They package, and they take them out to several locations in the community where they know people typically congregate. And it's from that continued weekly interaction that other churches are seeing what he's doing and starting to work with him. And then also from that continued weekly interaction, he was then invited to join the local, what's called Continuum of Care Board. So each county or each geographic region has what's called a Continuum of Care. It's the organization that brings all of the organizations together that are doing the work of helping to address homelessness in that space. They invited Luther to come in. We want to invite your church, the Paradise Seventh-day Adventist Church, to come in and be a part of our Continuum of Care meetings because we see you're doing work in our community. I was able to join one of those meetings with him and get to talk about what's happening and what they're doing and staying in touch with them and how they continue to work on how can they be involved in that space for them of helping to address homelessness and what are the next little steps that God keeps opening up for them. And so I think that whole process of what I've seen him walk through is really, it almost mimics, what I have done or what God has done here and what I would advise of. It's really neat to see when you just take that first step, what God can continue to do. And, I obviously pray for the passion too, that God will give you for it.
Yeah. Like, what do you get frustrated about when you're going around your town or, where you live? Is there something that you feel like you could, that you actually have a passion about, that you could address that frustration and pray about it, see what's possible?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also, if people are really struggling to figure out something to do that's not overseas, on one of Maranatha's mission trips, we also have North America projects. So you might check maranatha.org to, see what's available you could serve without going so far. What did you take from your experience in Paradise and ministering to the community there that you're taking to your new role at the Northern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, trying to end homelessness in this conference? What did you take? What things have you learned that you're taking into this new role?
That's a really good question. And I'm really excited to be a part of this initiative. The Northern California Conference has created a new initiative to help address ending homelessness within our geographic footprint. So all the space from roughly the Stockton-Lodi area all the way up to the Oregon border. We're present in most of the counties involved. And so we want to try and mobilize and inspire the churches and schools within our counties to start stepping into the space of how can we come alongside the organizations that are doing the work to help end homelessness in that area, and or start up a new, see a need, and how can we create something new to step into that role. So the things that I have brought into this space are, I think, predominantly the work that I have done with trying to understand trauma and what that, the role that plays. And when I've met with organizations time and time again that are addressing homelessness, the theme that I hear about all the time is it comes back to trauma for individuals who are experiencing it. So much of it comes back to the trauma that they've received in their lives and been through that are creating barriers for them to move on in life. So understanding that, I think, has been a huge piece for me and a huge bonus that I bring into this work. And then I'm also grateful that as I'm stepping into this work, I have the opportunity to learn a lot more. I think my desire to learn more and to grow is also a gift that I bring into this space. I want to learn as much as I can. But I've also very much seen the compassion and being around people who have compassionately done work selflessly for their community is something that I get to walk in their shoes and hopefully carry on. But then I believe it's also a lot of just about relationships and being real with people, trying to connect on a very honest level.
Well, Joelle, it's been really inspiring to be able to partner with you, on the Shed project. It's been several years now, but your passion for serving others was infectious back then, and you're an inspiration, I think, to a lot of people in the Paradise community. If you want to see Maranatha did a TV episode on, actually a couple, I believe. I think we did a follow-up after the initial project, but I'll put those in the show description, actually. I won't send you on a chase trying to find it. So you'll see Joelle in there, and you'll get to meet some of the people that the Sheds benefited. And just really appreciate everything you did on that project and the work that you're continuing to do. And thank you for being on Inside Missions. Is there anything else that you want people to know about your work or the work in Paradise?
I just want to say again, thank you so much to Maranatha for what you guys came in and helped our community do. Again, it was one of those first signs of hope for so many. So it wasn't that what we did, right? It was what we did together that we were able to create. And in so many ways, if it hadn't been for the Shed Project, I don't think our church would have had this continued success that it's had in serving its community. So I really want to say thank you for the impact that you guys had, not only on myself personally, on our community, what you had for our church, and then hopefully, that will continue to inspire others.
Well, I was a big part of it. I was there for one day. We went up, I brought my kids, and we painted some of the sheds and did a little bit of work. But it was a really beautiful thing to be a part of and to see all those different people coming together from different communities. So wonderful thing when people work together, can make a big difference.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I really appreciate is that when we can come together and collaborate on projects like this, service projects, it's amazing what doesn't have to be a priority anymore. We can really let go of the things that divide us or that we have differences about, but we can come together and serve for a common purpose. I believe it's so uniting for us. And so that's one of the things we continue to try and do with our Love Paradise organization is how can we bring different organizations together all at the table and serve alongside each other, learn about each other.
Same team.
Yeah.
Joelle, thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin. You have a great day.